Hi everyone, Bethany Teeth Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new King Krule album, The OOZ. Singer-songwriter Archie Marshall, who began making some pretty significant musical waves in the earlier part of the decade with his former band Zoo Kid, before changing over to the pseudonym King Krule, which eventually led to a 2011 self-titled EP, a 2013 debut album, 6 Feet Beneath the Moon, and he has a new record out, full-length, 4 years later, an album I was excited for, especially considering that his debut was so good. Sure, it sounded like a young artist who was still trying to get his footing, but still, even at this early point in his career, Archie's music had a lot of bold and idiosyncratic characteristics to it. The woozy, dreamy rock instrumentation, his shouty, bellowing vocals, his expressive performances. And yeah, while he did lay it on a little too hard and heavy vocally sometimes, he was a kind of compelling songwriter too. I assumed that King Krule could really only go up from here, especially considering how wild and off-kilter and fun some of the lead-up singles were on this album. Half Man, Half Shark and Dumb Surfer, but this album is not the bold, sharp, focused effort that I was hoping for. It's 19 tracks, it's just over an hour long, and nearly every song here is barely a song. This record is really more of a series of vague, moody musical sketches that lack any real sense of direction. It's like something that constantly hints toward a song or gives the audience the impression that a song is soon coming, but never really comes to fruition. Instead of doing that, nearly every song here kind of hangs in this weird, awkward musical purgatory where it's not so developed that it becomes something, but it's not so underdeveloped that it sounds like nothing. It's kind of like watching a young, depressed college kid try to stumble home drunk from the bar, and he just does not know which way to go. Which could be an interesting point of artistic inspiration, but it doesn't really build up into anything compelling on this album. Sort of like all the minor genre references throughout this thing. I mean, there are notes of jazz and post-punk and art rock, as well as surf rock and psychedelic pop on this thing. It's a kind of cool aesthetic, but all these sounds are basically just swirled together violently to the point where they just become this really gray, blasé, uniform Buh. It was just so easy to get impatient with this thing. It was so aimless, so downtrodden. And while I can appreciate how potent the sadness on this record is, without any compelling songs to really kind of carry or guide any of that emotion, it just spills in every direction and doesn't really collect into anything significant. Like whatever intense feelings are fueling this album, it's so strong to the point where it's actually debilitating to the performances and to the writing process. This record is kind of like a shade or two above a total stranger just sitting down next to you on public transport and just spilling out onto you every single horrible thing that's been happening to them over the past week or so. There are a handful of very colorful and interesting highlights on this thing, like the schmaltzy and fun Dumb Surfer, the very quirky and animated VIDUAL, which is easily one of the most cartoonish and just over-the-top tracks on the entire project. There's almost like a Halloween vibe to it too. The frantic Half Man, Half Shark did grow on me in the track list, probably because it was so much more interesting than most of the material here. And I really like the sinister and nightmarish tone of the Locomotive. But even tracks on here that hit a pretty decent groove or have a nice steady chord progression, even they hit a point of tediousness where they just fail to continue developing into anything. The opener Biscuit Town, or the song Logos, or the sour, surreal, noir jazz direction of tracks like Cadet Limbo or Check One. And there are numerous tracks on this thing that just feel like weird, funny interludes or filler cuts. Filler cuts on an album of songs that feel half-conceived. And honestly, Archie is not really bringing the vocal fire he typically does on a lot of these tracks either. His performances are sleepier than ever. Like on the song Lonely Blue, his singing just is not engaging in any way, shape, or form. It's just kind of easy to tune out of what the album is trying to do or trying not to do. At this point, I can't tell. Which is pretty much the case for nearly every track here, at least to some degree. I mean, if you took the best moments this entire album has to offer, you would have a pretty good EP. And honestly, it's not even simply that the album is too slow or that it's too patience testing. The title track on here is a highlight for me, and it's one of the slower and spacier tracks on the entire record, but there's actually a sharp, vocal melody to this track. There is a coherent progression to this track. It reaches an emotional intensity point that's very satisfying. It's not like Archie is just delivering some kind of sound bed or musical motif and just letting it hang there and meander to the point where he and the band get sick of it. Moments like the title track that actually amplify and empower the sorrow and the anguish that is fueling this record are just too few and far between. And honestly, this record for me is almost as disappointing and almost as large a fall from grace, in my opinion, as like when Foxygen dropped and Star Power. Like it's that far off. I'm just kind of feeling a decent to strong 4 on this one. Tran?
Oh, he's so cruel. You can say he's the king of cruel. Like King Krule.
Zishin, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best. You're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe, and please don't die. Just stay hydrated. Eat some fruits and vegetables. Down there in the comments, leave an insightful comment. Leave a detailed opinion of how you feel about this record, and engage with some other people. Make some new friends over the internet. Start a rap group, and climb to the top of the charts. Over here next to my head is another King Krule review. You can click on that, or you can click on the link to subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next one forever.